happening right now. There's not one thing you think is funny, truly. There's not. The only funny thing right now, truly to watch, is the news, because literally you watch it and you just see, people climbing through the windows of Fridays with blowtorches, and you go, honey, you got to come in here and see. You got to come in here and see. The guy, he's got a bat. He's in, I think it's Ruby Tuesdays. I can't wait for Trump to not accept the election results or whatever, and there to be like this weird civil war. But by the way, all of this military stuff is there. The military is sending a strong signal to Trump. Don't count on us. That's what a lot of it is. They're sending a strong signal going, don't count on us. We're not with you. And I just can't wait for that to happen and there to be like some real just civil unrest and some real problems in the country. And then, one of these guys on Wall Street's, just drinking a Cabernet, and he's just sitting there, and he just, turns on the TV, and he's like trying to understand. He's like squinting. He's squinting, and he's just seeing, burning and everything like that. And he just kind of shuts it off, and then he goes, His wife goes, what's going on? Is there a problem? He goes, they blow it up, the media. They make it bigger than it is, Everything's fine. Everything's okay. And, he just fucking ignores it. Just fucking lights a cigar and everything like that. And then he hears like the sound of distant chanting. And he goes, it's interesting. The neighbors are loud. They're usually not that loud, but I guess they're having an event, and he smiles. He goes, it's nice to have parties. He remembers when he used to have parties. And the chanting's growing louder, and he doesn't understand. Chanting's growing louder, and now he's a little curious. He gets up, he's got the cigar, and maybe he's moved on from the Cabernet. Maybe he's a little snifter of brandy or something. He's at Macallan, a nice whiskey, and he just sees, and all of a sudden he just sees he just sees the people, and many of them are in black, and many of them aren't, and they're angry, and they're carrying things that look like weapons, batons and clubs and things like that, and maybe one guy's got a chainsaw. And now he's a little nervous. He doesn't quite understand what's going on, and they come into his property and they start lighting it on fire, and now he's a little disappointed, He doesn't really mind the house burning down because the house was never what he wanted. He loves the property, and he thinks I'm insured, maybe I could build something else. So even in the initial stages of them burning his home, he sees the opportunity in it, right? He sees this could be like a blessing in disguise. He sees the thing going up, and he goes, I got a good policy on this house. And even if the wife gets it, he goes, me and her haven't been connecting. We haven't been connecting as much, So he sees the opportunity, and maybe she gets horribly scarred, and he just sends her away to some sanitarium, and then he could kind of, call that waitress at Bobby Van's in Sag Harbor that he really likes, because she's an older woman, but she's, big tits, and she gets them, and she likes power, and she appreciates him, and not like his wife does anymore. She doesn't appreciate him. This new one does because, she's new, and new is important, and new is good, and it's been a while since he's had any new. So he's watching his house burn down, and he's thinking about maybe his wife being horribly scarred, and still there's nothing that's really troubling him. And then a couple of the people start to approach him, and he says to himself, it's not a huge deal. I'm sure they just want to talk. And then they kind of start pushing him. And this is when he goes, now his physical safety starts to enter his mind for the very first time in the whole equation. And he goes, this is a real issue, and I don't know how I'm going to make it out of this. He's thinking in his mind, does he know any fighting moves? Not really. He's been in only a few scrapes. He's lost most of them. He's a wiry framed, small man that made all his money, closing down the companies that he imagined big surly guys work at, and. So they're now getting him, and now they've hoisted him up, and they're carrying him, and he's now very uncomfortable because he now realizes that this might just go left here, like even though he's tried really, really hard, this may not be a good equation. This might just end very, very badly, and he doesn't really know where this is going to go, and they walk him, and they're walking him to a tree in the middle of his property. It's a big tree. He's always loved this tree, And they they're just, they start tying him around this tree. And he goes, this seems very strange. It reminds him actually of one of these kind of fun rituals they used to do at Bohemian Grove. He thought maybe that was going to be it. He's like, maybe they just want to have fun in nature, nature, huh? But no, they start tying him around a tree, and then they start dousing him with something, and he recognizes that smell. It's kerosene. It's kerosene. And they're dousing him, and finally he goes, oh, I think they're going to light me on fire. He's still very calm and collected, He didn't realize he was going to die like this, but he's had a pretty decent life. He's made a lot of money. Some people have made more. A hell of a lot of people have made less, The kids went to the best schools. He's only cheated on the wife a few times, and he tested himself for STDs before he had sex with her again. He's done everything responsibly and right, And he's there, and he's just, soaked in kerosene. He doesn't want to say anything offensive. He's thinking of legacy now. He's thinking of his legacy. And it's kind of a proud legacy to be burned at the stake in the Hamptons, really, by an angry mob. He'll probably be remembered. If he is remembered, it'll probably be with some type of sympathy, right? It'll probably be with some type of sympathy. And they're burning him, and they haven't burned him yet, but they all have torches, and they're getting ready to burn him, and he's just there, and he's doused in kerosene and everything like that, and he's tied to the tree, and he finally starts understanding, that there are some problems in America. There are issues in America. And he never understood that. And so then they start burning him. And he's smelling his own flesh burn. And the pain is so intense. He's gritting his teeth, and his teeth are almost breaking, and the blood is kind of oozing out of his mouth. He's just clenching his teeth, and he can't even speak. There's so much pain, There's so much pain. And he's just, as he drifts off, and he's just, again, cooking, tied to a tree in his Southampton home. As he's cooking, the last thing that he thinks to himself as he goes, man, maybe we should have let them get a knee operation. I guess. But then he reminds himself that hindsight is 20/20. And he cares. He cares more about the fact that as soon as that house is burned and that tree is burned and that his body is burned, a nice young family of guys like him will move in there. So even though he's dead, his last thought is, you know what? Fuck him. You know how expensive it is to put in a new knee? A hell of a lot more pricey. If you multiply it by the amount of people that really need it, it's a hell of a lot more pricey than just building a new house for another hedge fund guy that can just move in there. And that hedge fund guy will look out at that burnt tree, and he'll maybe learn a few lessons, but I bet he won't. So even in the last throes of consciousness, he decides against the knee operations. He says, fuck it. You know what? The system's important. What is my flesh? What do I have to say that will ever be greater than the system? That's what gets people up in the morning, right? My life is nothing. So he kind of has a smile on his face. He has a smile on his face, and it's charred. You can kind of see it. But the smile is because the last thought he had, he goes, man, the next guy who buys this property is going to get such a good fucking deal. Good night.